You are so kind to me. Though you have acknowledged me, the acknowledgement actually goes to those who have my shared experience. And so I'd just like to take a moment and know who in this room are veterans. So if I could have people who have served in the military and who are veterans, please stand so we can see who you are. I'm a career Army officer, so of course what I'm going to do is I'm going to start you off with a war story. So I'd like to share with you something that happened to me in 1993. I was a 30-year-old captain, and I had just gotten transfer orders to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and I was going to an assignment at a combat training center. Now my job when I got there was to be responsible for airdrop resupply during the training exercises at the joint exercise area. And to do this, I had to be parachute qualified. So my transfer orders routed me through Fort Benning, Georgia. The Army's parachute training, it's called Airborne School, is a very physical 3 weeks. I know we have a lot of veterans in the room. Give me a big hooah if you are airborne qualified. Okay, hooah. The third week of the 3-week airborne training is what is called Jump Week. And now what happens during Jump Week is that you make 5 exits out of an aircraft. And an exit is exactly what it sounds like, is that you go to the open door of an aircraft and you walk out of it. I mean, really, what could be so hard about that? Okay, so here's what happened. I had what was called a weak exit. And I know my who out there knows what I'm talking about. So when you walk out of the door of a C-140 aircraft for a training jump, first of all, you need to know it's flying at about 150 miles per hour. And when you walk out, you're only about 1,200 feet above the ground. And you hold on to a static line, so it's connected to your parachute, and it's also connected to the aircraft. So you don't have to pull a ripcord or anything. It's automatic. You hit the end of that static line after you go out and your parachute opens. And you're only about 1,200 feet above the ground for training, because what happens is that you don't want to expose a paratrooper to enemy fire for any length of time, so that's why you jump so low. And if it were a real combat mission, as opposed to the training that I was doing, you come out at about 700 to 900 feet. When you exit, it takes a little less than 4 seconds for the parachute to open, and then you descend at a rate of about 22 feet per second towards the ground. And what you're supposed to do when you hit the airstream is that you snap into this tight body position, and your feet and knees are together, and your elbows are tucked tight. You chin on your chest, you hold the end of that reserve parachute. And then the chute pops open, and then all you do is then you look around, you prepare to land, look for other jumpers, and you prepare to land safely. But what happens at 150 miles per hour in an aircraft, remember, I haven't done this before, is that it's kind of like, you know, like when you hold a Kleenex and the car window's a little bit open, you let go and it gets sucked out? Well, that's kind of what happens to a human body when you get to the door of that aircraft. And so I'd never actually been sucked out of the door of an aircraft before, and I wasn't expecting it. So when I got sucked out, I had this little weak exit, and what I had is I had this like little chicken wing. And so instead of having those elbows tight, my little chicken wing was sticking out. And what that caused is when I hit the airstream at 150 miles per hour, it caused me to go into a spin. And so I spun, and my suspension lines twisted all the way up to the canopy. And with that slack from this weak exit, and I have extra slack that shouldn't have been there in my risers, the canopy release assembly, this big chunk of metal that's right about here, it had enough slack to pop me right in the mouth. Clean extraction of my front teeth here. I'm bleeding down the front of my mouth, and despite this jumper error and the little chicken wing that I had, I have the good sense that I need to correct what's going on here. So with the twist in my risers, what I have to do is that I have to reach up, like they taught me, and I have to pull those suspension lines apart. I have to bicycle my feet. And what that does is that untwists you enough that you pop open so that you can then get into your prepare to land position. So I'm falling at these 22 feet per second. We already started at 1,200 feet to the ground. I know time's running out of myself. And I did everything right. I did what the airborne instructors had taught me to do. And so when I finally landed, and I did land safely there on for our drop zone, I managed to get myself back on track, and I did end up landing safely on the drop zone. And as I reached up and I popped that same canopy release assembly to collapse my parachute as there on the ground, I just all of a sudden, I remembered something that the airborne instructors had told us before we went to board that aircraft. And they had said, jumpers, trust your equipment. It will not fail you. And sure enough, that parachute opened. And I have to tell you, now I'm 52 years old. I've been in the Army for almost 29 years. And I realize now that trusting my equipment has been a guiding principle for both my leadership approach and also my life approach. But what does that mean? What is your equipment? Well, your equipment, it's your values, your skills, the attributes that you have that are you, that go with you, no matter where you are and what environment you're working in. They are the foundation of who we are as both a leader and a person. They're the touchstones that we fall back on, well, when we, in life, have a weak exit, or we find that we have made ourselves twisted. In a room full of successful people, here within the business communities, you know why you're successful. Let's be real. You're just being coy if you pretend like you don't know some of the reasons that you have been successful in your careers and in your lives. And so I thought about it, and for me, here's my equipment. No matter where I am, at the Pentagon, on vacation with my friends, or at the Out and Equal Summit, I believe I'm a kind person with an innate sense of fairness. My equipment is compassion, which I learned from my mother, a sense of humility, a sense of humor, though I think I am a lot funnier than I actually am, listening rather than waiting for my turn to talk, calmness and poise under pressure, as demonstrated by keeping that clear head and being able to untwist those risers. Honesty, remember, never surprise the boss. And no matter what job I have or what I'm asked to do, I work really, really hard. All my life, I have trusted this equipment in this way. And no matter what, no matter where I was, I could count on myself. I knew that that parachute would open. Well, and that kind of brings us to the second axiom of parachuting. If your main parachute doesn't open, you have the rest of your life to activate your reserve. So, in 1993, incidentally, the year that Don't Ask, Don't Tell went into place, I didn't know how my life was going to turn out or how much I was going to need to trust that equipment. Because I served for 25 years of my Army career under the ban that prohibited people from being openly gay in the military. And I perfected compartmentalizing my military life from my personal life. For 25 years, I lived in constant fear that one slip-up, one unguarded sentence about my real life would end my Army career. We have to keep in mind, under what became known as Don't Ask, Don't Tell, it wasn't a matter that you might be fired if someone discovered that you were gay or lesbian. The law mandated that you must be fired. And I knew that despite the ban, there was nothing incompatible about my own personal values, my equipment, and my ability to serve in uniform. And I have to tell you, I loved and I love serving in uniform. I love the values that that uniform represents. So I honed an expertise about being silent about my life. I kept solid walls between those compartments about my military life and what I refer to as my off-the-grid life. And for me, it was just survival, so that I could continue to serve my country in the way that I love doing. But then in September 2011, in part due to the hard work by many of you in this room, I am forever grateful to you, the law that had become known as Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. Finally, after 25 years, I could live without fear, without constantly looking over my shoulder so that no one could discover who I really was. I was in Afghanistan on repeal day, but upon my redeployment, my partner Tracy and I, we began planning our wedding. And in March 2012, at the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C., Tracy became my wife. Then shortly after, in May of 2012, I was notified that I had been selected for promotion to Brigadier General. Upon receiving the news, I was certainly humbled at the Army's confidence in my potential. But mostly, I was terrified. Because here was my problem. I was married. Of course, my spouse would promote me. It's tradition in the military that your family share in your promotion ceremony because a soldier's success depends in large part upon the support of their family. But I had a wife instead of a husband. There was potential that when my wife placed that new rank on my uniform, that I would become, just by virtue of timing, the nation's first openly gay general. To be totally honest, I was in a panic. For 25 years, I had made an art out of keeping my two worlds separate. I felt like I was about to get sucked out of the open door of an aircraft at about 150 miles per hour. So first thing, I went to my equipment. First thing, honesty. Never surprised the boss. I wanted my boss to promote me. I had worked for him for about 5 years, but I wasn't out to him. He was retiring. His retirement ceremony was actually going to occur about a month before my own promotion ceremony. So Tracy, of course, had never been to a military function with my coworkers, so my boss had no reason to know her. So Tracy and I decided that the best thing for us to do was for her to go with me to his retirement ceremony, and just as a natural kind of flow of the day, I would introduce her to him. I mean, really, what could be so hard about that? Okay, so here's what happened. In my stress over the simple act of saying, "Sir, please meet my wife, Tracy," I didn't think about the fact that at his retirement, every other single leader would be there in the command to see him retire. So by default, I ended up introducing Tracy over and over again at this event. Afterwards, I remember very distinctly going into the bathroom so that I could recover. I was a fit of anxiety. My hands were shaking. My heart, frankly, was beating out of my chest. I felt trapped, cornered, and just a little bit afraid about what had just happened because it was so unlike any other experience I had had in a military setting. But you know what? I had done it. For the first time, I had been honest with my boss about who I really was. Apparently, I had given myself my own little chicken wing. I'd twisted my own risers, but the parachute opened. My own promotion ceremony happened about a month later, and I was still afraid because I knew that my story was about to become a news story. I was being advanced to Brigadier General by the same organization that less than a year earlier would have been fully within its right to fire me had it discovered my relationship with Tracy. I was holding in my heart 25 years of messaging that somehow my life mattered less than other soldiers, and even though I knew it was the right thing to do, you still hold in that messaging. In the period leading up to my promotion, one of the public affairs officers, so the Army was very supportive of me, but one of the public affairs officers confronted me with a statement, you know, you need to decide right now, are you going to be the gay general or just the general? And my response was, well, just the general, of course. Because you see, at that point, neither of us had the tools to understand that I didn't really have to choose between those two things. Despite the habit of fear, I knew that as a senior leader, I needed to do this for all the thousands others of soldiers and allies who were living with that same messaging at this time. I knew that being authentic was the right thing to do. And I certainly did not want to disrespect Tracy by excluding her. So with my boss presiding, Tracy and my dad replaced the rank of colonel on my jacket with the rank of Brigadier General. And despite my fears, I had done it. I'd done it. I was honest about who I was. So does being honest automatically mean that you are now authentic? We talk so much about our authentic selves. Had having my wife participate in this military ceremony moved me into being my authentic self? Afterwards, when talking with Tracy, I discovered that I was so practiced at not including Tracy in my life that even though she was up on that stage, even though she had participated in that promotion, that I had not written Tracy into my remarks. I literally failed to thank her for her support. I was so practiced at silence, so practiced at compartmentalization, I had unintentionally excluded here. She did not hear from me that public thank you that is so very much deserved as a military spouse. So in my coming out, again, I had a bit of a weak exit. My risers were twisted, and I have to say in that case, my mouth was got a little bloody again. But you know what? My parachute opened. And as you can see now, 3 years later, we can be certain that my equipment got me safely to the ground. And what my journey from moving from the simple act of being honest to being authentic has taught me that my foundational tools, my equipment, those can get me through the weak exits and the major transitions in my life. And do you know what? Your equipment can too. So jumpers, trust your equipment. It will not fail you. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story.